Hello, hey, this is JJ Humphrey. I'm with Bobby Cleveland. We're waiting for a couple of our guests to show up. They're trying to get on. We're having a lot of technical difficulty. So they may join us. I hope they get a chance to join us because they would bring a lot to the conversation. I've been working with both of these ladies. One's name's Mick, the other name's Rachel. Rachel is an attorney. Mick runs a podcast. Meow. It's a really good podcast. But I've been working with these ladies, Bob, on all of the information on COVID. And I don't know if you remember this, Bob, but we actually had both of these ladies on previously to discuss COVID. And we talked about the protocols. You remember when we did that interim study, and we had the interim study on COVID?
Yeah.
And we actually had such a large study that we filled up three.
Move rooms, yeah.
Yeah, we filled up three overflow rooms. I've never seen anything like it. It's the biggest thing that I've been involved with as far as.
Well, hey, I got a question. Now, I don't know a whole lot about what you're doing, but I know there's something here that you have to have. You sent something to the Attorney General that he has to do, and he hasn't responded back to you one way or the other.
No, he hadn't even called us. Yeah, Bob, here's the deal. Everybody that's watching has probably heard that Biden pardoned Fauci. So Anthony Fauci, in fact, Bob, if you looked at the new, he's not the CIA director, but he's over them. They come out with information today saying that the CIA knew that the COVID origin was going to be there in Wuhan, that it actually was in Wuhan. So it appears like that it was in Wuhan. So it appears like our government already knew that. And Biden comes out and pardons Anthony Fauci. Of course, he pardoned him. That was what's bad, Bob. He didn't even pardon himself. He wasn't paying much attention. He should have pardoned himself. And he pardoned all Hunter and the whole family. He pardoned, but now they're saying that pardon may not be as good. That it may not count to pardon somebody for a crime that supposedly doesn't exist. Bob, what happened to us, man?
It said on there that it's going to be something reset or something in the next 3 minutes. So
yeah.
Well,
here we go. Finally. Okay, hey, Rachel, sorry, the guys may be live, but I can't really hear you, but can you get in? I tried it, and it finally let me in.
I'm seeing you, Mick.
Hey.
We've got you.
Okay, great. Now I can hear you on my phone. Let's see if you can hear me.
Tell them, try to get
Rachel, can you hear us?
There.
Yes, I can.
You hear it right there.
Okay, great. I'm going to hang up with you, Rachel. Okay.
Everybody on now.
Wow.
That was a challenge. Me and Bob
right. That's the way we roll.
I want y'all to know me and Bob had it covered. So here's what we're discussing is that Joe Biden did an executive order pardoning forward on Fauci and, of course, his family and everything. But what we're talking about is the brief and how that Fauci is really, he's not immune from prosecution in the states. And so the states can go after him. All he was given was a pardon by the federal government, but our states can go after him. And really, in some ways, that may be worse for him than if the feds went after him, because our language is loose enough here in Oklahoma with the murder one language that if he was found guilty of crimes that resulted in death, guess what? He's eligible for actually first-degree murder and can be actually put on death penalty for those types of crimes. So what happened is that we filed a brief, and again, Rachel is an attorney with us, and so Rachel and some medical researchers, some doctors, a lot of people worked together to get that brief, and y'all did that brief. So Rachel, why don't you tell us what's in the brief?
Sure. Thanks, JJ. So, yes, what we did is we took a look at what evidence we have, and this describes what I call the COVID criminal enterprise and lays all that out. I think in other shows you've addressed that. So unless you want me to go into some of that and that evidence, I won't do that here. I'll just kind of talk about what's in the brief, and then we can break it down.
Sure.
But the evidence that we saw for the hospital homicide, we believe, falls under the following Oklahoma statutes. As you mentioned, murder in the first degree. We also have second degree, because it depends on what will be found. Solicitation for murder in the first degree. Terrorism and biochemical terrorism. Oklahoma does have a criminal statute on that. Participation in a pattern of racketeering activity. Engaging or conspiring to engage in a pattern of criminal offenses. So this is your state RICO. Kidnapping. And I can break that down a little bit, but suffice it to say, and JJ, I'd love for you to break that down more with your background, but essentially where one is unable to leave of their own accord, and particularly here where they are in that detention, unlawful detention, there is also services that are being taken from them or they are performing, and for money. By the way, in some other states that actually constitutes trafficking. So here we have kidnapping. We have battery and aggravated battery.
I was going to stop you right there. When I first started looking at kidnapping and we were talking about it, and I was like, oh, that's not kidnapping. That's not going to be. So I go pull the statute for kidnapping, and I'm going, well, I'll be darned.
Yes,
check this one, check that one, check that one. So there's all these elements, guys, when we're looking at a crime that you have to meet that code, to meet that statute. And what you have to do is kind of check them off. And guess what? When you're separated from your family, when you're helped, you're not able to leave. You can't leave of your own accord. When they sedate you out of your mind to where you don't know upside down from sideways and wouldn't be able to make a choice. And then when they batter you and put you on a vent that takes your life, when you had no ability, no capacity to actually give them authority to do all that, that's the kind of thing that we're talking about. So I didn't want to interrupt you, but I felt like people need to know that.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So going into what you said, that's battery and aggravated battery. I also wanted to point out one other thing about the kidnapping. You mentioned basically the chemical restraints, but there are actually physical restraints that a lot of these hospitals are putting on people to keep them from moving the vent, to keep them from getting water. It's and I think they're loosely using the idea of, you're a detriment to yourself or others, the Baker Act, which is nonsense. Okay, going forward, just a few more that we have here. In Oklahoma, you have specific crimes that relate to the duty of care for caretakers, and that would apply to hospitals. So the statute, the title is Caretakers Abuse, Financial Neglect, Sexual Abuse, or Exploitation of Charge. It's under that. You also have the verbal abuse of the charge. We have some pretty egregious stories that have come from victims' families and victims themselves who've survived. Then finally, we have here abuse, sexual abuse, exploitation, or neglect of a vulnerable adult. So these crimes fall under the idea of those who are in some way incapacitated or disabled, or are under the care of someone else. There are specific duties that are required, and if you violate those in a criminal manner, then these apply. And just I don't want to go on too long here, but a couple other things that we put in the brief. Everybody wants to know who have we identified specifically? Well, obviously Anthony Fauci, everybody understands that, ex-director of NIAID. Cliff Lane, currently NIAID director. You have Francis Collins, ex-director of NIH. Deborah Birx, who was with the White House COVID response team and a former director of the DoD HIV research. Rochelle Walensky, I think most people are familiar with her, ex-director of the CDC. Stephen Hahn, ex-commissioner of the FDA. Robert Redfield, ex-director of the CDC, Peter Daszak, who is currently the president of EcoHealth Alliance, and people may be familiar with that name because of their involvement on developing this whole wretched thing through gain of function criminally, developing this. Ralph Barrick, who's a professor at University of North Carolina, also involved in that. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he's the one that holds, I don't know how many patents. I think Dr. Martin has all of that, but that's why we have him here. And Rick Bright, who's the director of Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority. People know that as BARDA. And then very importantly, and I'll close with this, those are the policymakers. Those are the ones who are deciding what the countermeasures are under the PrEP Act, inducing or encouraging executives to to declare states of emergency for purposes of triggering the provisions of the PrEP and CARES and other statutes that are applicable. And then they're also the ones who are putting forward the perverse incentives and disincentives so that everyone complies in the healthcare field to institute only the countermeasures that are desired and not the actually effective treatments that we know of. And none of that would be possible to get down to the victims were it not for the administrators of the hospitals themselves, who are the ones who take the money through the CARES Act and through other federal provisions. And they're the ones who impose the administrative requirements within their hospital and apply the pressure on the healthcare providers, including putting their livelihoods, their jobs on the line. So very, very importantly, we have the administrators in there too.
Go ahead, Bob.
If we don't have the Attorney General, if he's not going to respond, if he's not going to do anything, are we dead in the water?
No. And this is going to depend on, and I think JJ probably can speak to this far better than I, because I've been looking at this on a survey across various states, but district attorneys can begin investigation as to their jurisdiction. And of course, if we have multiple DAs do so, then it could become a statewide thing. And that puts more pressure on the Attorney General to look at this from a statewide level. But I'll cede the floor on that because I think the JJ would know more about that procedure.
Well, and here's the deal. What I was talking to a former highway patrol on this. He called me yesterday or day before on this very subject. And I was saying, hey, we already submitted this a month ago. Guys, this has been submitted a month. So our listeners need to know we didn't just come up with this because we saw him pardon Fauci. We already had this in there a month ago with this entire brief. And again, we worked, and Rachel and Mick have been working much longer than I. And Mick got a hold of me, and we had an interim study, and we put it all together with all of these people we're talking about. So we've been working on this for months. They've been working on it longer than I have.
Years.
Years. Okay. And so anyways, this guy from Indiana is calling for the same things that we're calling for. They're just not as, they don't have all the evidence because, again, this brief it lays it out why they didn't use hydroxychloroquine, why they didn't use ivermectin, how that they knew that it was effective, 98% effective, and how they stopped doctors by threatening to take their license and stopping the insurance payments and the Medicare payment, and all the way the doctors would run their office. They either had to take just out-of-pocket payment or they couldn't run their office. So again, they were forced by monetarily forcing and incentives. And so again, yes, the DAs can file it. It would be better under the AG because it's statewide. However, if enough DAs want to, you can actually go to a multi-county grand jury. That's something nobody's thinking about, but there's a way around the AG that you can get into. Now, he kind of controls that. It's under their purview, but you can slide that in there. So there's a lot of ways, but the main way that we put it on the AG is we get on all of our podcasts and we go across the state. Mick, what are you doing right now going across the state? Where's the next place you're going to spread the news on this?
Well, we started out in Ada, and just to back up a little bit from there, we actually tried to go to Shawnee, Potawatomi, and about 20 hours before we were supposed to walk in the door, they got a heads up from their board at the Gordon Cooper Votech, and they said that we would be too disruptive within the community. But I think it's because of the board and because there's a larger presence of maybe some of the hospitals there. But then we went to
Can I
Ada.
stop you just right there? One of the biggest places that I'm aware of in Oklahoma that there were problems in their hospital was it not Shawnee that had
Yes,
a lot
it
of
is.
problems? So I can understand when they say that we would be disruptive. What's funny, we weren't coming in. We've already had one of these. There was no problem. We're not coming down there shooting guns or putting firecrackers off. We're having a conversation like we're having today. They did not want that conversation.
Right.
So we had that scheduled there at the Gordon Cooper Technology Center, had it scheduled weeks? I mean, you got me
3 weeks ahead.
Yeah, 3 weeks ahead of time, and last minute had to call everybody. And what's hilarious, the one at Ada that you're talking about, a lot of the people that was going to go to that one actually came down to Ada. We had a good turnout at Ada, I thought. So go ahead. Where else are you going to do that?
So now on the 30th of this month, we're actually going to Sapulpa. Now, Sapulpa is close to Tulsa, and that's another place where we have a larger amount of people who died of the hospital protocols, COVID hospital protocols. We're going to be at the Praise Center Ministries, which is at 5672 East Highway 117 Sapulpa, Oklahoma. It's going to be from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. We are going to live stream, and we're going to have a little different speakers. Dr. David Martin has joined us, and we've also got Dr. Jancy Lindsay, who is a microbiologist, and she is doing some fabulous research on gametes and the spike protein, the mRNA in those the sperm and the ova. So she's going to share information on that as well. But the one thing that I want people to recognize is that the CDC says that 20,000 people in the state of Oklahoma died of COVID. Well, JJ, we know that they weren't taking them out of their homes, in body bags. We weren't pulling people off of the street. What we have is we have a situation where people were dying in the hospital of the hospital protocols. So that's another reason why we're going across the state, is because we want everyone to get the information. We want everybody to have the opportunity to ask questions, but we also want to engage with that community because we are adding people to the brief that has been submitted to the Attorney General.
Hey, Mick, I need you to back me up on something because Bob's not going to believe this.
Okay.
When I spoke at Ada at your COVID, what do we call that? Town hall?
Town hall.
Yeah. So when I spoke at Ada at your town hall, did I not speak for only 10 minutes? I didn't speak over 10 minutes, did I?
You did.
I got it under 10 minutes, didn't I?
I had him on a timer.
Well, you're right. You're right. I don't believe it.
Bob, I swear to it. I actually spoke for only 10 minutes. It's write it down in the history book. So again,
locked in.
I'd have to be there to see it to believe it. I don't want to believe. I wouldn't believe what anybody said.
I have it on film.
I got a witness.
It's been recorded. Hey, let me just say this too. I know that the Attorney General has not yet acted, but really, JJ, the Oklahomans are really declaring this as a doctrine of the lesser magistrate. We are really basing this on a principle of interposition. We are really calling on the Attorney General to stand in the gap and open up those criminal investigations and prosecutions into the COVID hospital protocol deaths. These are the constituents, those who lost their loved ones. They died because of this forced cookie cutter protocol, and they weren't allowed to do anything else. They came in, they were testing everybody for COVID. The moment they saw that there was a positive COVID test, boom, it didn't matter. Nothing else mattered. I had people who have told me that they went in for cardiac issues and they weren't taking care of the cardiac issues. They were only taking care of the COVID issues. And that is because of the incentivization that they were getting. But some of these people, JJ, have also survived, and now they have long-term disabilities because of the drugs like remdesivir that they were getting. So we're really imploring him to protect the Oklahoma citizens. And we want him to call out this as evil and investigate and prosecute. But we also want that 30,000-foot view of COVID, right? Because the next H5N1, Zika, yellow fever, Dr. Hote is forecasting that we're going to have a pandemic on January 21st of 2025. That, game over, history repeats itself. Mm-hmm. We won't comply, but everyone must be informed. Everybody has the right to know the truth, because that is their God-given right to have bodily autonomy and medical freedom.
Well, let me tell you what I think, and y'all correct me, any one of y'all three, correct me if y'all think I'm wrong. But things are different today than a month ago. So let me tell you one thing that's different. We couldn't come on. So if y'all remember, I had y'all on right after we did that interim study and we got ready to turn the brief in and all of that. I don't even think we turned the brief in at that time.
Not yet.
No, it was right before.
It was in October. It's turned it in November.
Yeah, but do you know that right after that, I was told not to even say the word COVID on our podcast because we would have been taken down. So today's a little bit different day because now we have the freedom, because all of these of what President Trump's done, now a lot of these social medias have said, no, we're not going to censor. So one, that's different. Now we're being able to actually have a conversation, get the word out, freedom. Okay, second thing is we are seeing, so this morning when I was getting ready to go to church, I always like to watch Maria on the morning show. And I'm watching Maria, and she had on Ratcliffe on there. And Ratcliffe was talking about that the CIA has known that this was out of Wuhan and that it originated out of China, and that it's looking very clear that that's where the origins came from. So now we're going to see information where the public is now going to be faced with, hey, these people knew, these people were involved, and that they were actually, you mentioned the word a while ago, Rachel. What do you call that they were studying their gain of function, I think is what
gain of function research, right.
And the reason they were doing it over there is because they're not supposed to do it here. If you want to go back and read go back and read polio information. There's a lot of information that says the reason polio got out was because they were doing gain of function even back as far back as that, and that's how that virus got out and why we got infected. So again, I don't know that it'll come out on all that. That's just stuff I've read and studied. But here's the deal. They couldn't do it, so they paid for it over there, and then this has been unleashed because of their actions. Now, whether that was done intentionally or unintentionally, but they didn't allow it in China, and China allowed traffic to go out of Wuhan to infect the rest of the world. So it seems like it was absolutely done intentionally. And so we can see more of that, but now we're having freedom to discuss this stuff. We're seeing awareness. The other thing is our governor is running. Our AG is running for governor. So our Attorney General is running for governor. And I can tell you this, that it's going to be really, really contingent on him to do the will of the public. And I can tell you, when we had that study, we had the largest group of people turn out. Now, here's what's funny. The media would not report on that. Very little media coverage on that. So again, things are changing. We're having town halls. We're going out and speaking, making the public, we're doing these podcasts, making the Oklahoma public aware that there is a method. We have this pardon, which outraged everyone. So now here in Oklahoma, people are outraged on that. They're getting the information. They're being told. And now people are learning that we actually have this awesome, awesome brief that lays all this out to where it's not hypothetical. It's not maybe. It is absolutely, I mean, does it?
What would happen?
Well,
JJ, what would happen if you had another meeting like you had now today? Would they fill up a whole?
I think it'd be bigger. I think it'd be bigger. What do y'all think?
I do too. I can tell you this. I have been talking to people across the state, from sheriffs to healthcare workers to vaccine injured to people who have lost their loved ones. And every day I am getting phone calls and I am getting texts. The word is going out across the state. And I just want people to kind of be aware of that. It is historic, but Oklahoma should really lead the charge. Rachel, you talked about terrorism. Well, here in Oklahoma in 1995, we dealt with a terrorist attack when Timothy McVeigh blew up the Murrah building, right? So we know how to handle a terrorist situation. And while it may be different in this situation, we absolutely are well aware of how to bring things together and how to get things done. It's the heartland and it's the Oklahoma way. But JJ, can I just tell you one thing? Real quick, I'm going to take a little time trip. 1986 was the year that the Vaccine Safety Act was passed, and it was supposed to address growing concerns about like vaccine safety. But what it actually did was granted vaccine manufacturers kind of this legal immunity from lawsuits. It protected them from financial liability due to vaccine-related injuries. Dr. Fauci has repeatedly defended that law, and he's emphasized the role in its safeguarding vaccine development. In fact, I'm going to quote him. He said, "Without liability protections, we risk losing manufacturers willing to invest in life-saving vaccines." And I just want people to realize there's some other stuff that has gone along in here, but in 2013, the NIAID, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Global Preparedness for the Board at the World Health Organization, and others, they took that Wuhan Institute of Virology virus 1, and they recreated and they resynthesized it at Chapel Hill, North Carolina in 2013 and 2014 under the direction of Dr. Anthony Fauci for the purpose, and I am quoting him, and I got this from my very good resource, Dr. David Martin, who you all know, he was here. Dr. Fauci said, to make the public understand, this is why they did it, to make the public understand the need for a medical countermeasure, such as a pan-coronavirus vaccine, we need the media to create hype. We need to use the hype to our advantage to get to the real issues. Investors will respond if they see profit at the end of the process. Now, to me, JJ, that's an admission of intention. And let's not forget about that COVID vaccine and how deadly that it has been to 1.7 million adverse events that have been reported. But real quick, I'm just going to say this. To get to that golden egg vaccine, which is the big money, right? To push out that countermeasure, COVID, the bioweapon, was released upon the world. They used fear, denial of early treatment. They refused and they demonized, like you talked about, ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, and they pushed people into the hospitals and they gave them the hospital COVID protocol where they instilled fear in them, and then they discriminated against them on the basis of their vaccine. And I've had too many people now come to me and say, you know, when I went in and they said, "Are you vaccinated?" And I said, "No, I'm not vaccinated." They said, "Well, I'm sorry, you're going to die."
Right.
That's not right.
Let me unroll, because you just said a whole lot right there that people don't know all of it. Let me unroll some of that. So here's the deal. They are protected. So my understanding, Rachel, jump in if I'm wrong. My understanding was they are protected and cannot be sued. Now, I know a couple of states are saying, no, because they had evidence that they knew that in advance, and they're going in and trying to file lawsuits. But these pharmaceuticals are protected because they did, the government come in and gave them, because of COVID, a just carte blanche cover of liability. They have no liability.
More or less. Obviously, PrEP Act immunity is not going to cover criminal acts. The whole idea is it's based loosely on a negligence standard.
Right.
So if it's a mistake, whoops, then, and even gross negligence, sadly. What isn't covered is when there's intention. So willful misconduct,
and that's where
knowing misconduct, and then criminal intent.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm going. If they have willful, that may open the door to some liability.
Yeah,
I hope they can be sued. But that is why our brief is not looking, or your brief, they did the brief, I did the probable cause stuff, but I have to have their brief to kind of outline my stuff. That they are what makes the brief. Okay, but here's the deal. It's criminal. He is not immune, and none of these people are immune from criminals. So the Congress can't immune criminal behavior. They can't walk in there and go, we're going to give you, and again, we'll find out whether Joe Biden can do that with pre-immunity.
Not at the state level, JJ. You know this. Not at the state level. Yeah, that's only crimes against the United States. So,
well, I was hearing arguments today on the news that they really don't think that he has the authority to pardon a crime that hasn't been committed yet or hasn't been charged yet.
Right.
They are arguing.
I think morally it's nonsense, right? I think on a common sense level it's nonsense. But I'll tell you the context in which it usually comes up. You've probably seen this. When somebody is called to testify, they're subpoenaed to testify, and there's some question about what happened, they would often plead the Fifth and not testify. But the case law is very clear that you can't both plead the Fifth Amendment against self-incrimination and accept a pardon preemptively for anything that might be criminal.
You have immunity. You're
right.
required to.
Well, JJ, the point I was wanting to say is, obviously, the DAG doesn't think this is a serious event, and there's enough people that cares about it now. But if we had a major show up of people out there to show them they are people all over the state interested in this, that might change his opinion. The guy's running for office. He wants every vote he can get.
Well, Bob, we had that meeting there in Ada. And if you were to look at it, may not look like a huge crowd because we were in a massively huge building.
Bit like 1,000 people.
Right. But if you were to pull everybody into that we had on what was that, Thursday night or something like that, guess what? And it was cold. It's cold that night. So to get the crowd out that we had there in Ada, and we had people come from all over the state to show up at that meeting. And again, that's not counting the people that were online and catching it,
right.
I do believe that there are people.
We had a meeting at Paul Blair's church in Edmond early on when there was just, there was nurses, there was lawyers, there was political, a big number of people. There's probably 1,000 people at that. And that was when this thing first started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question because I know that, he has this preemptive pardon and there's talk that it might even go all the way to the Supreme Court. But there was the case, the Burdick versus United States, that says that a pardon carries an attribution and an accusation really of guilt, and an acceptance of that is a confession of guilt. So,
That's
does that play in anywhere into that?
If you went look back, Nixon, I'm sorry, go ahead, Rachel.
No, I just wanted to add a little thing before you respond, because I think you might get into this too. The case law is really clear that unless the executive has done an assessment of guilt and actually says, I'm pardoning because I think the person was innocent, if that is not there, then that's what the Burdick case is saying, is that the acceptance of the pardon by a person, the use of that pardon, is an admission of guilt. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's no problem. But I think when they gave, when Ford, if you remember, Gerald Ford pardoned Nixon, but when he gave him that pardon, one of the conditions of that pardon is that you are admitting guilt by accepting this, that there is guilt that goes with that. And again, I think one of the things, I will tell you this, and correct me if I'm wrong, which a good question for you, Rachel. So let's say that they do get a pardon. Let's say he is pardoned. Now he's brought back. He no longer has the threat of, so he can't use the Fifth Amendment. He's going to have to tell the truth. He's going to have to tell all the stuff. Now, can he say, well, I'm going to invoke my Fifth Amendment because I may be charged in state crimes? Can he, if he's being interviewed by the feds, can he invoke a Fifth Amendment based on the fact that all these states are wanting to go after him, as well as other nations? I know Russia. I got some stuff on Russia. Look, I say let's just pack him up and send him over to Putin and let Putin deal with him. And that
Siberia sounds great right now.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. Why not?
So,
well, that's a really interesting question. I'm not going to claim constitutional scholarship on that. I would defer to my colleagues who are constitutional experts.
That's a great question. I think
it's a great question. I don't think you can claim the Fifth in front of a federal investigator or under a federal subpoena. I don't think you can do that. And I don't even think that you could do that saying, well, maybe the states. I believe that it's all within sort of the offenses against the United States. But that's a very good question to look into.
Oh, this is a very, if you like law and you like these kind of things that are new, because we're talking about things that are going to set precedent that have never been done. And again, I sit around a lot of times. I have to go to these meetings where the accountants are giving statistical data and they're almost giggling, when they give it, and you're going, man, y'all need to get a life, but I almost get giddy when I talk about stuff like this because it's JJ, this has never been done before.
JJ,
that's right.
In that David Flanner's case, where they forced him pretty much to get up and he wanted to take the Fifth. The judge wouldn't allow it.
Right. Yeah. That's the case we're looking at where they told him he had
sounds like the same thing. But I would like to get be able to get, like, I could never get any tickets. I wouldn't have to pay any tickets the rest of my life.
Bob, you get out all the tickets. You get out all the tickets and you hit the curb all the time. And quit looking at your phone when you drive, Bob. I would say, if anybody's listening, do not give Bob a pardon for anything got to do with driving. So we'll throw that out there. But here's the thing. So our listeners know, I don't think everybody understands. This brief lays out a protocol.
Yes.
It lays out, and you used the words a while ago, because when you're looking at a criminal and you're looking at elements of a crime, knowingly, willfully, intentionally, maliciously, the thoughts of the person, did they actually know that this was going to cause death? Did they actually know this medicine was good and intentionally stop people from using it so that they could profit off of the drugs that they had, or intentionally kill people? And this brief outlines how that we know that they knew that the hydroxychloroquine and that the ivermectin was good. They didn't just, they knew it. We can prove it. They knew it, and they intentionally stopped it. They threatened people with their livelihood, with their license, to stop that. We also can show that they monetized and incentivized for people to come in, be separated from their family. So again, that's that isolation when we're talking about kidnapping. They isolated them. They sedated them. And when we're talking about think about this. When have you ever went in for the flu or pneumonia and they sedated you out of your mind?
Right.
Don't generally happen. In this, pages of medication where they sedated you to where you didn't know upside down from sideways. They withheld.
People OD'd, JJ.
Oh,
We have stories of people who OD'd, and we can tell because in the records they got Narcan.
Right.
Well,
and you can just look as a medical person, you can look and see how much fentanyl was given. There were lethal doses of fentanyl being given. I mean, just massive amounts, just hour after hour. And it wasn't just fentanyl. It was like the polypharmacy. They were given morphine. They were given fentanyl. They were given Ativan, plus they were putting
Dilaudid, I think. Yeah.
Yes, I'm talking unbelievable. But then remdesivir, one of the things that come out of our interim study that I was shocked with, because I was of the impression remdesivir was a brand new drug.
Oh, no.
And one of the things I learned through, and guys, we had meeting after meeting. We had weekly meetings getting ready for the interim study. So we did that for a couple of months in advance. And so I probably learned more sitting around listening, and learn that remdesivir was used in Africa around 2008 for Ebola, involving Fauci was involved with that, if I'm not mistaken, knew about that, and over 53% of the people who used remdesivir died. So they knew that it was deadly, and they brought it back. And again, that was part of the protocol. You got separated, you got sedated, you got remdesivir, and then you think about what old Granny always said: drink lots of liquids, because you're getting dehydrated. If you get the flu, you get the COVID, drink lots of liquids. Okay. Well, guess what they did? They withheld liquids, they withheld food, because they were prepping you for the vent. They were prepping you for the vent. Now, did I leave anything out on the protocol? And again, that's the proof that they were setting you up. They were paying these hospitals to put you on a vent, and they were paying hospitals when you died of COVID. Now, did I leave anything out?
Go ahead, Mick.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, it was in 2018 that they did the Ebola clinical trials, and that was Fauci and Barrick who did it both with what you said was correct, a 53.1% death rate. But they also used it on military service members through the Department of Defense in clinical trials back in March of 2020. Prior to the EUA initiation, and it was a 64% death rate. But that's absolutely correct. They brought him in. The first thing they did is they isolated the patients. They weren't allowed to have their family members advocates. They took away communication devices. They did not give them informed consent. They were putting people on DNR and hospice protocols without anybody knowing about it. They weren't even signed. I have seen page after page where there's an informed consent and it says the word patient written at the bottom. It doesn't say the person's name. They were starved. They were dehydrated.
Our listeners understand these people were sedated out of their mind. Separated from their family. Their family's not there. So again, they don't have their loved one, and they're putting on their patient, saying that they consented to these treatments or to being placed on the vent. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. That's medical fraud, right? Is that fraud?
Yeah, that's right. There's huge medical fraud here, and there's probably false claims act cases that can be brought. Speaking of civil cases, that would be possible on Medicaid fraud.
That would be. If we were able to prove that, it would not only be criminal, but people could go after those medical people. Liability right there. That's not covered, right?
Nope. And we do know how to do that. And I would say there's some people around the country working on that.
Is it factual that in Africa they only had a few hundred people contact?
I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
He's saying that he heard in Africa there was just a few hundred people who had Ebola. don't think
on the clinical trial. Yeah, I don't remember the exact number of people, but there were people who did not have Ebola who were on the clinical trial. They were given remdesivir and they died, and they didn't have Ebola.
Well, let me ask another question that kind of I put forward to the AG in the probable cause. So, guys, what we did, we took the brief. I wrote a probable cause using, and again, Rachel mentioned this a while ago. It's called the Oklahoma Criminal Enterprise Act. Now, if anybody's ever heard of RICO, which is the Racketeering, Intelligence, Criminal, Organizational Act, I think if I got all that right. If you've ever looked at that, which is what the feds use to go after the mafia and these organized crime units, this is the same thing. It's just Oklahoma's version. And this is what allows us to reach out and tap somebody like Fauci, because he's up here, but what he's doing is affecting criminally here in Oklahoma. So that way we can issue a warrant for him, bring him back to Oklahoma and prosecute him in Oklahoma. Now, let me ask you this. All of those people who were given a choice, you take the vaccine or you lose your job, or you're kicked out of the medical profession, or you're kicked out of the military, or, many other things, or you can't get treatment. I've got one guy told me that when he come in, they told him they would not treat his wife unless he took the vaccine. Now, what's that got to do with anything? Unless he took the vaccine. And we know many people were told, like Mick said a while ago, if you were unvaccinated, they were treating you differently than somebody who was vaccinated. And we're often told you are going to die. And many people say they told them right in front of them. And so,
well, and we now have evidence that there were people who, while they were sedated or otherwise incapable of giving consent, they were given COVID vaccines against their consent.
That's exactly right.
There's a group that's looking at that to possibly sue on that basis. But
wow, well, would that be extortion if you were told you either take the vaccine or your wife's going to die? We're not going to treat her. I mean, it sounds like extortion to me.
It sounds like extortion to me. I mean, the question is, what are the components, right? What kind of money are they trying to get? But it's plain language. The common man knows that that's an extortionary or a coercive act. Absolutely. And what's being held up, what's being placed against one another are fundamental rights. So our constitutional rights, our fundamental moral rights, were being pitted against one another. So that's unacceptable. It's heinous.
Absolutely. Hey, you know what? I'm sitting here looking at our time, and I will tell you what, this subject fascinates me because we are already at almost the end of the hour, and we had to quit right on time today, which I'm not used to, but we've got another podcast coming on. Mr. Hayes is having a podcast. Y'all tune in to Aaron Hayes's podcast there. He's going to have that. Hey, also, I want to say before we leave, I'm going to put this brief on my webpage. So give me a day or so. And what we're going to do is we're going to come out with a media release on all of this to make the state aware. Go after our AG. Don't let him breathe on this thing. Go after him. And I'm going to put this brief. I'm going to put the probable cause on our webpage. You can go to jj4ok.com, jj4ok.com. Do y'all have your brief up where they might go? Mick, do you got anything up yet? Or
we put it on Rachel's website, and I'll let Rachel give you the website address there. But I do want everyone to know that press release, we are going to be doing an email, I guess, bank or blast, if you will. We're having as many people across the state send the brief and the press release to the Attorney General. We are doing a phone banking as well. So please contact me at Mick mic@mick, Meow, MEOW.com if you want to join in and help us. And please be sure and come out January 30th to Praise Center Ministries in Sapulpa.
Is that your actual name, or is that just some?
My actual name is Mick Rosato, but I go by Mick.
Okay, I told you, Bob. I did it for you, Mick. Hey, Rachel, what's your webpage where they can go? And
Sure. If you go to my firm website, which is viruslaw.group, that's V as in Victor, IRESLAW.group, GROUP. And you click on the news tab at the top, it will be the first document there. And you can actually download it from our website as well as read it in the browser.
And if you'll take the time to do that, you're going to be as shocked as I was when I met these ladies and when I started listening. And again, I know I talk a lot, but when we first started getting together, I was just sitting back listening to the doctors and to the attorneys and to all of these people. I was mind blown at what I was learning, that I knew that things were wrong, but I did not know how much they knew and how intentional these actions were, that they knowingly, intentionally, maliciously killed people.
JJ,
you want to say?
You was probably smoking something that day. That's why you was being quiet.
I probably had the COVID, Bob. I couldn't hardly talk. You know what I'm saying? I take that ivermectin on the horse medicine, though. I do want to tell everybody that they're lying to them horses. That don't taste like green apple. It tastes like, if you ever ate a green persimmon, it tastes like a green persimmon. It's pretty nasty. You got to just kind of shove it in the back of your throat.
Listen, if you need ivermectin, I'll hook you up. I'll get you the hookup.
Human compounding.
And paste.
Somebody on TV advertising a emergency medical kit.
I'm thinking about buying it, but I've got a bill to make it to where hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin can be over-the-counter drugs purchased over the counter.
Yeah, that's what we need to do. I want to leave your listeners with something. You probably knew this, but the federal government has a stockpile of hydrochloroquine. And right at the very beginning, under Trump, there were efforts to get that out to the public, basically in an over-the-counter manner. And you know how they had the COVID shot drive-in? Well, basically like that, where people could just pick up hydrochloroquine. And it was Woodcock at the FDA who blocked it. The way that she set up the contract with the states made it impossible to give it out to the people. That's intentional.
Our state had a stockpile and was ready to go, and because of what you're talking about, they ended up not going out.
Yep.
I think they threatened them with federal money or something. And again, I'd have told them to stick it if it'd been me.
Yeah.
But
That's right.
Well, yeah.
But
And they even pulled the monoclonal antibodies. Remember that?
Yeah, they did
The
that too.
administration came in and pulled all the monoclonal antibodies. We were giving it hand over fist to people, and it was helping. And then they pulled it back and said, nope, you can't have it anymore.
Effective. I took it. I had COVID. I was serious. I thought I was going to die. 2.5 hours. Guess what? I wasn't out of the woods in 2.5 hours. Doctor made me lose 36 pounds. That didn't hurt neither. You know what I'm saying? But and actually what was amazing, 36 pounds and my diabetic issues went away. My cholesterol issues went away. I had testosterone issues. And those all went away when I lost some weight. So I need to work on that a little bit more. Quit eating them donuts. But hey, here's what I do want to end on is we want you to come out. We want you to come to our town hall meetings. We want you to get this press release. We want you to go to these websites, look at the brief, study the brief, get a hold of the probable cause. And then one major thing is you call the AG. You have your family call. You start putting the pressure on the AG. He wants to run for governor. We need to tell him, no way, if you won't stand up and protect the people of Oklahoma, go after Fauci, then we don't need a governor who won't take a step right now to protect the people of the state of Oklahoma. So you let him know what you think. That's what I think.
That's right.
Anybody got any last words? We got 1 minute.
No,
Absolutely. And I want to remind everyone, this is not a partisan issue. This is human lives that were lost intentionally for money. That's got to stop.
Everybody.
And I just want people to realize that there is hope. We are out there. We will not stop. We will not give up. We will not leave anyone behind. Do not give up hope. We are still working. So join us in Sapulpa on January the 30th. Praise
We're right
Central
on
Ministries.
time. First time ever. We're going to end on time. I appreciate you ladies being here. Bob, I appreciate you, and I'm going to call you in about 15 minutes.
That's good.